Welcome to a completely customized exploration into the absolute most fascinating, baffling, and brilliant piece of machinery you will ever own.
Yeah,
In fact, it is the only thing you truly own. We are talking about your own body.
exact.
As you sit there listening to this, you might feel like you're just relaxing, maybe commuting, maybe making coffee. But right now, at this exact millisecond, there is a universe of 37.2 trillion individual cells furiously working inside of you just to make this exact experience possible.
It's staggering when you really think about it.
It is, and today our mission is to just skip the fluff and go straight into the meat of Bill Bryson's phenomenal book, The Body, A Guide for Occupants. We're taking a deep dive straight through the bizarre, brilliant, and sometimes hilariously flawed architecture of the human form.
And what a journey it is. When we establish the overarching theme right from the start, is that the human body is a miraculous paradox.
A paradox how?
Well, think about it. We are essentially a collection of cheap, inert dirt. You are made of the exact same fundamental components you could scoop up from a garden bed.
Right.
Yet somehow, this completely ordinary matter manages to arrange itself in a way that allows us to write staggering poetry or, to stop and appreciate the beauty of a red sunset, to feel profound affection, to fight off thousands of deadly diseases over decades.
Yeah, it's doing all that while we just sit around.
Exactly. It's an engine that runs 24 hours a day for 70, 80, maybe 90 years, usually without needing any major spare parts. And it's fueled by nothing more than water and a few organic compounds. The machine is soft, it's accommodatingly mobile, and it is entirely self-regulating.
I want to unpack this from the very beginning, down at the absolute bedrock of what makes you, you. Because I remember long ago sitting in a junior high school biology class. I was a slouched, pimply teenager, and the teacher hit us with this common myth.
Oh, I think I know the one.
Yeah, they said that all the chemicals that make up a human body could be bought at a local hardware store for about $5.
The classic $5 human myth.
Right. I don't remember the exact change they said. Maybe it was $2.97 or $13. But the point was, it was practically nothing. Even in 1960s money, it was a spectacularly humbling revelation. I just remember being astounded at the thought that you could build a human being for the price of a cheap lunch. Is there actually any truth to that?
It is a great story, and it's one that is circulated in biology classrooms for generations. But what's fascinating here is that many authorities have actually tried to compute this for real.
Really? Like legally pricing it out?
Oh, yeah. They wanted to know exactly how much it would cost in raw materials to build a human. And the most respectable, comprehensive attempt to debunk this $5 myth happened during the 2013 Cambridge Science Festival.
Okay.
It was conducted by Britain's Royal Society of Chemistry. They decided to do the math using the most highly purified elements available to get a true, modern invoice.
I read about how they did this, and I love their methodology because they needed a template, right? Like a typically sized human to base their math on.
They did. And conveniently, the guest director of the festival that year was the actor Benedict Cumberbatch.
Which is just perfect.
So the Royal Society of Chemistry literally set out to calculate the exact invoice to build one Benedict Cumberbatch.
How many elements are we actually talking about here?
According to their incredibly precise calculations, it takes exactly 59 elements to construct a human being.
Just 59.
Just 59. Now, out of those, just 6 elements do the vast majority of the heavy lifting. Carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, calcium, and phosphorus.
The big 6.
Right. Those 6 alone account for 99.1% of what makes you. But it is that remaining 0.9% where the chemistry gets wildly unexpected and incredibly specific. To be a complete, functioning human, you cannot exist without a little bit of molybdenum or vanadium, manganese, tin, and copper.
The amounts we need of some of these trace elements are just laughably small, though, aren't they? They're measured in parts per million or even parts per billion.
Exactly. The Royal Society of Chemistry pointed out that for every 999,999,999.5 atoms of everything else in your body, you need exactly 20 atoms of cobalt.
Wow.
And exactly 30 atoms of chromium. It's a bizarre microscopic recipe. But let's look at the big players first, because this raises an important question about how we perceive our own physical weight. The biggest component in any human being, filling 61% of your available space, is oxygen.
Which honestly sounds completely wrong when you first hear it.
It does.
I mean, we are almost two-thirds composed of an odorless, invisible gas. Why aren't we just floating away like balloons?
Because of how that oxygen is stored. The oxygen is mostly bound up with hydrogen, which accounts for another 10% of your body to make water.
Ah, right.
And as you know, if you have ever tried to drag a plastic wading pool across a lawn, or if you've ever had to walk around in soaking wet winter clothes, water is incredibly heavy.
It really is.
It's one of the great ironies of nature. Two of the absolute lightest things in the universe, oxygen and hydrogen, combine to form one of the heaviest substances we regularly interact with.
So when we talk about the actual cost breakdown of this Benedict Cumberbatch invoice, how does it pan out? Because the Royal Society of Chemistry didn't use the cheap hardware store stuff, right? They calculated this using only the most purified forms of everything.
Right, they went top shelf. Well, oxygen and hydrogen, despite making up so much of us, are relatively cheap. All of your oxygen will only set you back about $14.
Okay, $14, I can afford that.
Your hydrogen costs a little over $26. Nitrogen makes up 2.6% of you, and that is a massive bargain at just 40 cents for a whole body's worth.
40 cents.
But then you hit the carbon. Carbon is the structural backbone of life on Earth.
And you need about 30 pounds of it to make a human.
Yes. And according to the RSC, 30 pounds of highly purified carbon is going to cost you $69,550.
That is a massive jump.
And we are just getting started. You need calcium, phosphorus, and potassium. You don't need massive amounts of them, but they are pricey. Those three together add another $73,800 to the bill.
Good grief. What about those microscopic trace elements you mentioned earlier, the cobalt and the chromium?
That is where the economics become almost comedic. Most of the remaining elements are drastically more expensive per unit of volume, but we require so little of them that the cost is negligible.
Give me an example.
Take thorium, for example. Thorium costs over $3,000 per gram, but it constitutes just 0.0000001% of your body. So you can buy a whole body's worth of thorium for 33 cents.
I love the bottom of this receipt. I remember reading that all the tin you need is 6 cents. Zirconium and niobium are 3 cents apiece. And then there is samarium. You are 0.000000007% samarium.
It is such a microscopic amount that the Royal Society of Chemistry didn't even charge for it. It's literally logged on the invoice as $0.
So what was the grand total?
When they tallied it all up, the final receipt for the raw materials of Benedict Cumberbatch came to exactly $151,578.46.
Wow.
And that is before labor and taxes. If you wanted to take a Benedict Cumberbatch home, it would probably cost you roughly $300,000 in total. Now, just to show how fluid these calculations can be, the PBS science program NOVA did an equivalent analysis in 2012.
What was their number?
Their final calculation for the fundamental components of the human body was just $168.
I'm trying to wrap my head around that massive discrepancy. How can one group of scientists say you cost $168 and another group says $151,000?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the massive discrepancy doesn't actually matter. It is entirely beside the point. You could have an unlimited budget. You could gather all the brainiest people who are alive right now or who have ever lived in the history of the world. You could endow them with a complete accumulated sum of human knowledge and give them all the highly purified samarium and carbon they want. And they could not, between them, assemble those inert ingredients to make a single living human cell, let alone a replicant Benedict Cumberbatch.
That's wild.
That is the astounding reality of us. The magic isn't in the ingredients. The ingredients are the same stuff you find in a pile of dirt. The only thing special about the elements that make you is that they make you. The magic is entirely in the recipe.
The recipe. That is such a profound way to look at it. We take this warm wobble of flesh completely for granted. We pass our entire existence inside it, and most of us don't even know where our spleen is or what a lymph node actually does.
Most people haven't a clue.
But behind the scenes, there's this invisible quadrillion-tasked universe operating inside you every second. Bryson points out a data point that completely blew my mind. How many times a day do you think a person blinks?
Most people would probably guess a few hundred, maybe 1,000.
You blink 14,000 times a day. 14,000. That means your eyes are completely shut for 23 minutes of every single waking day.
It's incredible.
Nearly half an hour of your day is spent with your eyes closed while you are awake, and you never even notice it. Your body just handles it on daily autopilot. But what I don't understand is, why don't we notice it? If the lights in my house flickered off for a fraction of a second 14,000 times a day, it would drive me completely insane.
It's a brilliant biological illusion. Your brain actually actively edits out the darkness.
Wait, it edits it out?
Yes, it's a phenomenon known as saccadic masking. When your eyelid comes down, your brain suppresses the visual processing for that split second. It basically stitches the image from right before the blink to the image right after the blink, creating a seamless, uninterrupted video feed in your consciousness.
So my brain is just lying to me.
The brain lies to you continuously to keep you from feeling like you are living in a strobe-lit room. And that blinking suppression is just the absolute surface level of the automation. When you analyze the body at the cellular level, the sheer scale of the mechanics becomes almost incomprehensible.
Right, those 37.2 trillion cells.
Yes, they are all responding to signals from other components. They are bumping and jostling around randomly, exactly like bumper cars at an amusement park. And what is perhaps most remarkable is that nothing is actually in charge. There is no central cellular CEO barking orders.
So the cells just do what they are programmed to do purely based on local chemical reactions.
Precisely. And the volume of tasks they execute is staggering. Every single day, your body undertakes a literally unquantifiable number of tasks. We're talking about numbers vastly beyond human imagining, a quadrillion, a nonillion, a quindecillion tasks, and it's a delicate, chaotic balance.
A lot of bumping around in the dark.
Exactly. And a surprising amount of what goes on at this elemental level is still being worked out by science today. Let's look at those trace elements again, specifically how they function within this cellular chaos. Take selenium.
Okay, selenium.
If you pluck almost any cell from your body, it will have 1 million or more selenium atoms inside it. 1 million. Yet, until very recently, nobody had any idea what they were actually doing there.
What did we find out?
We learned that they are practically holding the whole operation together. Selenium makes 2 vital enzymes. If you have a deficiency in those enzymes, you are looking at hypertension, arthritis, anemia, some cancers, and possibly even reduced sperm counts.
Wow, so it's essential.
You absolutely need selenium, which you can get from nuts, whole wheat bread, and fish. And here is where the bumper car chaos gets scary. If you take in too much selenium, you can irremediably poison your liver.
So the margin of error is incredibly thin.
Very thin. Getting the balance right is a delicate business. And it's not just about balancing the good elements. We also have elements inside us that are purely antagonistic. Let's talk about cadmium.
Cadmium. That doesn't sound like something I want inside me.
Cadmium is actually the 23rd most common element in the human body. It constitutes 0.1% of your bulk. But it is seriously toxic.
Wait, if it is completely toxic and useless to us, why is my body holding on to it? Why hasn't evolution figured out a way to just flush it out of our systems?
Because your body doesn't crave it, and it hasn't developed a perfect mechanism to expel it efficiently. Your body is a victim of bioaccumulation. Cadmium gets into plants from the soil. When we eat those plants, it gets into us.
So it's just unavoidable.
Pretty much. If you're listening to this in North America, you probably ingest about 80 micrograms of cadmium every single day. The body tries its best to sequester it, often in the kidneys or the liver, to keep it away from more vital systems.
But it doesn't do anything for us.
No part of it does you any good at all. It is just bad news that your cellular universe has to constantly manage and mitigate.
It's amazing that with toxic elements sneaking in and a vigintillion tasks happening every second, the machine doesn't just instantly break down, but instead it builds itself. Think about the embryonic miracle, how fast this machine constructs its own architecture from scratch.
It's incredibly fast.
Bryson notes that at just 6 weeks old, a human embryo is the size of a single lentil. Think of a tiny lentil sitting on your kitchen counter. At that size, its tiny heart is already fully formed and beating at 100 beats per minute. A lentil with a racing heartbeat.
That lentil-sized embryo growing so quickly makes us look like perfectly designed machines. But if we actually look at how our parts fit together, we're more like a mechanic's weekend make-do project.
A make-do project.
We have to understand that we are not perfectly designed from scratch. We are the product of 3 billion years of evolutionary tweaks.
Evolutionary hangovers and repurposed parts. This is one of my absolute favorite concepts from the deep dive today. We would all be a lot better off if we could just start fresh and give ourselves bodies built specifically for our modern needs.
Sure, starting from a blank blueprint.
But our genes come from ancestors who, for most of history, weren't even human. Some of them were fish. Lots more were tiny, furry creatures that lived in burrows. We inherited our body plan from them.
This brings us to what we might call the curse of bipedalism. Walking upright on two legs is our defining feature, but we pay a steep, steep cost for it. Because our ancient ancestors were horizontal creatures, our bodies were essentially tilted upward 90 degrees by evolution, and gravity has been punishing us ever since.
So the engineering is completely compromised. Is that why so many people have bad knees and lower back pain?
Yes. Because we walk upright, our knees take an incredible, unnatural pounding, and our spines are forced to bear weight in a way they weren't originally designed for, making us hopelessly susceptible to backache.
That makes perfect sense.
But the most dramatic evolutionary compromise is the pelvis. To support our upright posture and bipedal movement, our pelvises had to narrow and restructure themselves to anchor our leg muscles efficiently. But simultaneously, over a very short evolutionary time frame, our brains were getting drastically larger, requiring larger infant skulls.
That sounds like a terrible structural collision.
It is the ultimate structural collision. The evolutionary drive for bipedalism narrowed the birth canal, while the evolutionary drive for higher intelligence widened the infant head. This resulted in a pelvis that is just barely wide enough to pass a child, making human childbirth excruciatingly painful and historically dangerous compared to almost any other mammal.
And it doesn't stop at the pelvis. I was reading in the source material about how our ability to speak completely redesigned our upper bodies, but it came with a terrifying trade-off. Can you explain what happened with our throats?
Absolutely. Our bipedalism and our subsequent development of complex language completely redesigned the vocal tract. To articulate complex sounds, our larynx, which is essentially a small box made of cartilage, muscles, and vocal cords, dropped lower in the throat compared to other primates.
Okay, so it moved down.
Yes, and this new configuration gave us the unparalleled ability to communicate profound ideas. But the redesign placed our airway and our food pathway in a terrifyingly tight, overlapping configuration.
A design flaw?
A huge one.
Yeah.
Because of how the larynx sits to allow speech, it drastically increases our risk of choking. We are one of the only mammals that can easily choke to death just by eating dinner. It is an evolutionary trade-off. We gained the voice to write symphonies, but we lost the ability to swallow safely.
That make-do engineering is everywhere, especially when you look at recycled bones. I'm thinking specifically about the ear. To hear me right now, sound waves are hitting your eardrum, and those vibrations are passing through the three smallest bones in your body.
The ossicles.
Right. The malleus, the incus, and the stapes. The hammer, the anvil, and the stirrup.
And what is truly staggering is that for much of evolutionary history, those three bones had absolutely nothing to do with hearing. They didn't start in the ear at all.
Where were they?
They were jaw bones in our ancient ancestors. Over millions of years of evolutionary tweaks, as the reptilian jaw restructured into the mammalian jaw, these tiny bones were no longer needed for chewing.
So they just moved.
They slowly migrated upward and backward, finding a new home in the inner ear and a new purpose in transmitting sound. It is a perfect demonstration of evolution repurposing what it already has on hand.
It's like using leftover car parts to build a radio, or remodeling a house while you are still actively living inside it. You just shove the old support beams into the attic and use them to hang a chandelier.
That's a great way to picture it.
But sometimes evolution just leaves the leftover parts hanging around doing absolutely nothing. These are the useless and sometimes dangerous vestiges of our past, earlobes, for example.
Earlobes are a fascinating quirk. The British scientist and author Desmond Morris noted that about 2/3 of Europeans have free-hanging earlobes, while the other third have attached lobes.
Right.
But whether your lobes are tethered to the side of your head or flapping freely in the breeze, they serve zero purpose. They make absolutely no difference to your hearing, your balance, or to anything else. They are just fleshy ornaments.
And then there are the tonsils and the adenoids. They sound so important when a doctor talks about them. The tonsils are those two fleshy hummocks standing sentinel on either side of the back of your throat. They are part of a structure with a very grand name, Waldeyer's tonsillar ring.
Named after the German anatomist Heinrich Wilhelm Gottfried von Waldeyer-Hartz.
That is a lot of names for one anatomist.
He was a very busy man in the late 19th century. He's actually better known for coining the term chromosome in 1888 and the term neuron in 1891. He also first postulated that a woman is born with all her eggs fully formed.
So he was legitimately important.
Very much so. But his namesake tonsillar ring, not that impressive. The adenoids lurk out of sight in the nasal cavity. and they often shrink away to virtually nothing in adolescence.
Do they actually do anything?
Both the tonsils and adenoids are technically part of the immune system, acting as a first line of defense against inhaled pathogens, but you can have them completely removed without making any discernible difference to your overall long-term well-being.
But not all vestiges are harmless. The classic example is the appendix. We all know it's a finger-like protrusion off the intestines, and we know it's a ticking time bomb.
A very dangerous one.
Globally, it kills about 80,000 people every single year when it ruptures or grows infected. In the United States alone, nearly 400,000 people are hospitalized with appendicitis annually, and about 300 die from it. So if it is this lethal, repurposed part, why hasn't evolution gotten rid of it? What is it actually doing down there?
That is a brilliant question, and it shifts our understanding of the appendix entirely. For a long time, doctors just assumed it was a completely useless evolutionary leftover from when our ancestors were herbivores and needed a larger cecum to digest tough plant matter.
Right, just the leftover piece of the digestive tract.
But modern biological theory suggests it might not be entirely useless after all. The prevailing theory today is that the appendix acts as a safe house for good gut bacteria.
A safe house?
Think of it like a biological fallout shelter. If you get a severe case of dysentery or cholera and your gut is completely flushed out, the good bacteria hiding in the appendix can emerge to rapidly repopulate your digestive tract.
Wow.
So while it is dangerous when it gets blocked and infected, it might have historically saved millions of our ancestors from dying of severe diarrheal diseases.
So it's not just a glitch, it's a desperately needed backup system that occasionally misfires. That makes me wonder, though, how did it take us so long to figure out what all these parts were actually doing? We have all these brilliant theories now, but historically we were completely in the dark.
The dark ages of anatomy were truly dark. We have to contextualize just how little we knew. Up until the Renaissance, dissecting a human body was widely forbidden by religious and cultural taboos. You just didn't open the hood to see how the engine worked.
So what did doctors do?
Ancient physicians relied on animal dissections, mostly pigs and apes, and just assumed human insides were identical.
And even when the rules began to relax, very few people had the stomach to actually do it. It wasn't clean, sterile surgery. It was butchery in unventilated rooms. I was amazed to read that Leonardo da Vinci, who is famous for bravely cutting up bodies to study anatomy for his art, complained bitterly in his notes about how profoundly disgusting and nauseating decomposing bodies were.
It was a brutal sensory experience.
The smell and the horror of it kept medical knowledge stagnant for centuries.
And if general anatomy was in the dark, the historical ignorance regarding female anatomy was in a pitch-black abyss. For most of recorded history, the medical establishment, which was exclusively male, knew shockingly little about how women are put together.
The gap in knowledge there is just horrifying.
There's a brilliant observation highlighted in the book from Mary Roach's incredible work, Bonk. She notes that historically, vaginal secretions were the only bodily fluid about which virtually nothing was known, despite how crucial they are to conception and general health.
That's crazy.
Saliva, sweat, urine, blood, they were all studied endlessly. But the female reproductive system was treated with a mix of fear, disgust, and profound ignorance.
It's stunning how deep that ignorance went. Matters specific to women were treated as absolute mysteries. I couldn't believe this detail, the word menopause. It is a fundamental, universal milestone event in half the human population's life. Yet the word menopause wasn't even recorded in the English language until 1858, when it appeared in the Virginia Medical Journal. We had steam trains and transatlantic telegraph cables before we had a medical word for menopause.
The culture of intense medical prudery severely bottlenecked scientific progress. Abdominal examinations were rare. Vaginal examinations were almost completely out of the question.
So how did a doctor treat a female patient?
If a doctor had to investigate a woman below the neck, he would usually feel blindly under the bedclothes while staring fixedly at the ceiling so as not to compromise her modesty. Many doctors actually kept anatomical dolls in their offices.
Anatomical dolls?
Yes. This way a woman could point to the affected part on the doll without having to reveal her own body or even speak the name of the body part aloud.
And that social awkwardness directly led to one of the most famous medical inventions in history, right? The stethoscope.
Exactly. René Laennec invented it in Paris in 1816. Now, you might think he invented it because it magnified the acoustic sounds of the heart perfectly.
That's what I assumed.
But no. Putting your ear directly to a patient's chest was actually just as good, if not better, for hearing the heartbeat. Laennec invented the stethoscope primarily so that a male physician could check a woman's heart and lungs without having to directly press his face against her flesh.
That is wild.
It was an invention born almost entirely of social propriety, which just happened to become a ubiquitous medical tool.
Now, to contrast this historical ignorance of female anatomy, male anatomy was studied much more openly, yet the book points out it still holds quirks that most men today are completely unaware of.
Oh, absolutely.
Male reproductive anatomy is generally considered straightforward. Penis, testicles, scrotum. But behind the scenes, there are accessory sex organs that are structurally wild. I had no idea about the epididymis.
Most men don't. The epididymis is a piece of fine tubing, neatly coiled, located inside the scrotal sac, resting on the backside of each testicle. Its job is to serve as a nursery where sperm cells mature before they are ejaculating.
But the mind-blowing part is the sheer length of it. If you uncoiled the epididymis, it's 12 meters long.
40 feet.
That is 40 feet of tubing. You have the entire length of a greyhound bus tucked inside the scrotum, just coiled up microscopically. And there is a great linguistic trivia point here. The word epididymis is from the Greek for testicles. It was actually first used in English by the playwright Ben Jonson in his play The Alchemist in 1610.
Really?
He threw it into the dialogue just to show off, knowing full well nobody in the audience would have a clue what he was talking about.
The 17th century was a time of immense medical showing off, but also of profound, dangerous ignorance. Which brings us to the bloody truth of the circulatory system. This is a story of how incredibly hard it is to change a medical paradigm once it becomes entrenched dogma.
I want to dig into this because for the longest time, nobody knew what blood actually did, other than the fact that if you lost too much of it, you died. What was the prevailing theory before we understood circulation?
The prevailing theory dated all the way back to the Greek physician Galen, who lived around 130 to 210 AD. Galen's medical texts were considered absolute, unquestionable gospel for over a millennium.
Over 1,000 years.
Right. Galen believed that blood was constantly being manufactured in the liver from the food we ate, and then it was pumped out to the body where it was consumed by our tissues, burned up like fuel in a car engine. There was no concept of it returning to the heart. It was a one-way street.
So they thought we were just endlessly manufacturing and burning gallons of blood every day.
Exactly. And that completely mistaken theory ruled medicine for over 1,400 years. It informed the practice of bloodletting, the idea that you could have too much blood or bad blood that needed to be drained.
It's terrifying.
It wasn't until an English physician named William Harvey came along in the early 1600s that this dogma was shattered. Harvey was brilliant because he didn't just theorize, he conducted meticulous, gruesome, but undeniably effective experiments. He completely mapped out the closed circulatory system.
How did he actually prove Galen wrong? Without modern imaging, how do you prove blood circulates?
He used basic mechanics and mathematics. First, he calculated the volume of blood the heart pumped with each beat. He realized that if Galen was right, the liver would have to produce an impossibly massive amount of blood every single hour, more than the weight of the person themselves.
So the math just didn't work.
It was physically impossible. Second, he did experiments with ligatures. He would tie a tight band around a person's arm, cutting off the blood flow. He showed that the veins on the side away from the heart would swell up, proving that blood was trying to return to the heart, not just flowing outward.
Simple but effective.
Very. In 1628, he published a landmark work called On the Motion of the Heart and Blood in Animals, outlining exactly how the whole closed-loop system works.
Today, we look at that and think, wow, what a eureka moment. The whole world must have thrown him a parade because he fundamentally unlocked how the human body stays alive. But the societal reaction was awful, wasn't it?
It was vicious. In Harvey's day, his theory was almost universally ridiculed. He was rejecting 14 centuries of established sacred medical dogma. The diarist John Aubrey recorded that nearly all of Harvey's peers thought he was entirely crack-brained. He was publicly mocked.
They canceled him for being right.
They absolutely did. He was abandoned by most of his clients. His medical practice dried up. The medical establishment simply refused to believe that the great Galen could be wrong, or that the heart was just a mechanical pump rather than the seat of the soul.
That is so tragic.
Despite making one of the most important biological discoveries in human history, William Harvey died a bitter, rejected man. It took decades after his death for his circulatory model to be fully accepted.
It just shows how stubbornly we cling to what we think we know about our bodies. Speaking of old knowledge, there's a great piece of linguistic trivia in the text about our plumbing that I found hilarious. We have the urinary bladder, which connects to the kidneys via tubes called ureters. But the word bladder itself is ancient.
How ancient?
It dates all the way back to Anglo-Saxon times. It beats the words kidney and urine into existence by over 600 years. It just proves humanity has been complaining about needing to use the bathroom for a very, very long time, long before we even had the scientific words for the organs producing the waste.
That is the perfect encapsulation of our relationship with our bodies. We experience the immediate, pragmatic reality of it, the need to eat, sleep, and use the bathroom, long before we understand the underlying mechanisms. And sometimes those mechanisms glitch in spectacular ways. For all its miraculous engineering, the body is basically a wet, volatile chemistry lab that occasionally misfires.
Let's talk about one of those misfires, the ultimate glitch. I cannot stop thinking about the story of Charles Osborne. Charles was from a tiny town of about 600 people called Enthon, Iowa.
A town that, incredibly, also produced the tallest person in the world at the time, an 8-foot-tall man named Bernard Coyne. There must have been something extremely unusual in the gene pool or the water in Enthon.
Seriously. So the year is 1922. Charles Osborne is working, and he tries to lift a 350-pound hog for butchering. As he lifts this massive animal, he somehow pops a muscle in his diaphragm and triggers a hiccup response.
A seemingly harmless reflex.
Right, but at first he's hiccuping about 40 times a minute. Eventually, that slows down to a steady 20 times a minute, and he never stops. He just keeps hiccuping. Why? What is actually happening in the body during a hiccup?
To understand why he couldn't stop, we have to look at the mechanics. A hiccup is a sudden, involuntary, spasmodic contraction of the diaphragm muscle, which is the large sheet of muscle under your lungs that control your breathing.
Okay.
This sudden contraction essentially startles the larynx, that complex vocal box we talked about earlier, into snapping its vocal cords shut abruptly. That sudden closure of the airway creates that famous hic sound.
It's like a short circuit.
It is a reflex arc similar to when a doctor taps your knee with a hammer, but it involves the phrenic and vagus nerves. In Osborne's case, whatever damage he did lifting that hog put that reflex arc into a permanent, unbreakable loop.
And poor Charles Osborne's larynx snapped shut an estimated 430 million times. He hiccuped continuously for 68 years. He lived his entire adult life, got married, had children, all while hiccuping every few seconds.
It's unimaginable.
He only got relief when he was deeply asleep. And then, in the summer of 1990, just a year before he died, the hiccups abruptly and mysteriously ceased. 68 years of hiccups, and then silence. What I find terrifying is that we still don't know how to fix it.
It is truly humbling for medical science. Even today, with all our MRI machines and robotic surgeries, if you get chronic hiccups, doctors are at a more or less complete loss to cure you. They can try muscle relaxants or anti-seizure medications, but they often fail.
So what do they do?
The best, most immediate remedies a highly trained modern surgeon can suggest are the exact same folk remedies you learned when you were a child.
A doctor will literally tell you to have someone sneak up and say, boo, or rub the back of your neck, or take a bite of a lemon, or drink iced water, or just sit there and pull on your own tongue. We can transplant human hearts, we can map the human genome, but we cannot reliably cure a hiccup.
It highlights the dual nature of our medical progress. We are simultaneously incredibly advanced and frustratingly primitive. But we should contextualize how far we've actually come by highlighting a couple of the medical pioneers who fought back against this primitive darkness. We talked about how horrific early surgery was.
Right. Before the late 19th century, having surgery was practically a death sentence because of post-operative infection. You could survive the amputation, but the gangrene would kill you a week later.
Exactly.
But then we get heroes like Joseph Lister. The book includes an image of him operating at the Glasgow Royal Infirmary. What did he do differently?
Lister pioneered antiseptic surgery. Before him, surgeons would wear their bloodiest aprons as a badge of honor and would rarely wash their instruments between patients. They didn't understand germ theory.
They just didn't know the bacteria was there.
No, they didn't. Lister applied the microbiological discoveries of Louis Pasteur to the operating room. He literally stood there spraying a mist of carbolic acid over the patients, the surgical instruments, and the surgeon's hands.
That must have been harsh.
It was harsh on the skin, but it killed the ambient bacteria. He drastically reduced mortality rates and fundamentally changed surgery from a desperate butchery into a sterile, survivable science.
And alongside him, we have brilliant minds mapping out the invisible systems inside us, like the British scientist Charles Scott Sherrington.
Sherrington is a towering figure in biology. He systematically mapped out the central nervous system. Before Sherrington, we knew nerves existed, but we didn't fully understand how they communicated or how reflexes worked.
What did he discover?
He introduced the concept of the synapse, the tiny gap between nerve cells where chemical communication happens. Our entire fundamental understanding of how our brain talks to our muscles, how we sense pain, and how reflexes operate is largely due to his relentless, meticulous lab work in the early 20th century.
They are heroes who tamed the volatile chemistry lab inside us. But just to remind us that the lab is still volatile, Bryson throws in this incredible, bizarre medical anomaly from a 1979 medical journal. The paper is titled Fatal Colonic Explosion During Colonoscopic Polypectomy.
It is exactly what it sounds like, and it is a stark reminder of our internal chemistry. During a routine colonoscopy to remove a polyp, a doctor uses an electrified wire loop to cauterize the tissue.
But there are gases.
Yes, the human gut is filled with fermenting, gas-producing bacteria. We naturally produce methane and hydrogen. In this tragic freak instance, the natural combustible gases built up in the patient's gut, mixed with oxygen in just the wrong ratio, and the spark from the surgical tool ignited them.
A literal explosion inside the human body. It sounds like a bad cartoon, but it's a real medical paper. It is just a stark reminder that we are walking around with a fermenting, gas-producing bacterial metropolis inside our intestines.
Which brings us to the ultimate realization about this bodily machine. After hearing about toxic cadmium building up in our kidneys, ruptured appendixes, 68-year hiccups, and colonic explosions, it might be easy to feel incredibly fragile.
I certainly feel a little more fragile.
It is easy to feel like we are just one chemical misfire away from disaster. But the broader reality is exactly the opposite.
This is genuinely the most reassuring part of the deep dive. The World Health Organization compiles a massive, exhaustive list called the International Statistical Classification of Diseases and Related Health Problems. It is the master catalog of human suffering. On that list, there are slightly more than 8,000 things that can kill a human being.
Over 8,000 specific ways for the machine to break down permanently.
And the incredible triumphant truth is that you and I and the person listening to this right now will successfully escape 7,999 of them. Your body is a fortress of resilience. Every single day, your immune system is hunting down rogue cells, mitigating toxins, and keeping you upright.
Consider cancer. You get the most dreaded disease of our age, cancerous cell mutations, between 1 and 5 times every single day.
Wait, I get cancer every day.
Yes. Due to errors in cell replication or environmental damage, your cells mutate into malignant forms daily. And every single day, your immune system's natural killer cells recognize those mutations, capture them, and destroy them without you ever feeling a thing. You are constantly surviving lethal threats.
That is amazing. And the book also debunks some of the most depressing myths about aging. There's a famous anatomist who once claimed that the human body basically begins to decay the moment it reaches 18 years old. We've all felt that way on a rough morning, but the statistics tell a much happier story about how well we hold up.
The statistics are profoundly encouraging. We talked about how fragile our bones seem and the curse of bipedalism. But despite the constant wear and tear of gravity, 3/4 of men and half of women will go their entire lives without ever breaking a single bone in old age.
And remember those compromised knees we talked about. The evolutionary make-do engineering that forces our joints to bear our upright weight. Despite millions of years of awkward structural trade-offs, 3/4 of all humans will go through their whole lives without a serious knee problem.
If we summarize the core philosophy of Bryson's exploration, it is a testament to the miracle of the mundane. Yes, we get impacted wisdom teeth because our jaws evolved to be too small to hold them all. Yes, we get backaches because our spines are acting as vertical pillars instead of horizontal suspension bridges.
But it works.
But the overwhelming reality is that the body is an engine of unparalleled resilience. It remains pliant. It repairs its own damaged tissues. It extracts life-sustaining nutrients from the absolute miscellaneous junk we push into our faces.
We abuse it, we feed it terrible food, we deprive it of sleep, we sit slouched in front of glowing screens all day, and yet somehow it holds us together at a remarkably high level for decades. It is a machine that heals its own cuts, makes terrible jokes, feels profound love, and creates lasting art.
It is the ultimate testament to the magic of the recipe over the mundane reality of the ingredients. The 40 cents of nitrogen in the water somehow become consciousness.
I love that. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final, lingering thought to mull over. Wherever you are right now, if it's safe to do so, just close your eyes for a second. Take a deep breath. Think about the fact that every single atom currently making up your brain, the skin on your hands, the heart beating in your chest, it was all once just loose dirt. It was inert rock. It was stardust floating in a freezing void billions of years ago.
And right now, at this exact millisecond, 37.2 trillion individual, completely mindless cells are working together in perfect unconscious harmony.
They are firing electrical impulses, binding oxygen, and clearing toxins just to allow you to sit there, to comprehend the words I am saying, and to ponder your own existence. Through you, the machine is literally looking at itself. It is the universe waking up and thinking about the universe.
It is a profound privilege to occupy such a space.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. As you go about the rest of your day, we encourage you to treat your 40-cent nitrogen and your $69,000 carbon with just a little more awe today. You are a miracle.